Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include CDPR hiring modders for Cyberpunk, China cracking down on underage gaming, the Diablo 2 Resurrected Amazon getting a facelift, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the description below. But right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. Now before we move on, just a quick word from this video's sponsor, Dungeon Fighter Online 4. Now some of my stream viewers will remember that I played this game on Twitch a few months ago and was really pleasantly surprised with it. It's a multiplayer side-scrolling beat-em-up action role-playing game with over 700 million registered players worldwide. There's a ton of different classes and subclasses to pick from. You can allocate skill points to create different builds. There's item drops with different rarities, and you fight your way through dungeons. Recently, the demonic Lancer character got his Neo Awakening, which means he got access to new and more powerful skills. And there's an in-game event that will give special buffs to help players level up and gear a demonic Lancer. You'll also get items and gear every time you reach certain milestones. DFO also has an equipment rental service event that lets you try out some of the most powerful gear and weapons in the game on a temporary basis, as well as other events to help out new players. And the game has an active community on Reddit and Discord where you can find friendly folks willing to help out new players. And the devs also regularly host Twitch streams to communicate with their player base. So if you want to check out Dungeon Fighter Online, follow the link in the description and then use the in-game code FALL2021 your gift to obtain a silver or gold cape. In our first story, according to Dexerto, Blizzard is aiming to release Overwatch 2 before the summer of 2022. Now this directly contradicts a previous leak that suggested that a 2022 release for Overwatch 2 is unlikely. But according to Dexerto, an internal Activision Blizzard source told them that getting the game out as soon as possible is a high priority. Quote, "We're more than aware we need to get it out. So the word is the dev team has been told to lock in the features the game has, get it fixed, and get it shipped. We're looking to get it out before the summer of 2022. Now, another Blizzard source, a member of franchise development, allegedly corroborated this to Dexerto. Quote, "We've all been told that the aim is Q2 of next year. The timing of the release will factor in the Overwatch League schedule because obviously they don't want to switch game versions in the middle of a season." Overwatch League being the Overwatch esports. Now, this does make sense with Blizzard's February financial call, during which it was stated that, quote, 2022 will be a great year for Blizzard. The phrasing, though, lock in features, get it fixed and shipped, does suggest something of a rush. They're basically saying, wherever you are now in development, just lock that in, polish it so we can ship it. You can't add anything, you can't cancel anything, no more iterating on design. Even if you're unsure of things, just get it shipped. In other news, China is cracking down even harder on restricting kids' access to video games. China's National Press and Publication Administration, which oversees gaming and other forms of online media, has formally issued new rules to combat gaming addiction among teenagers. China already had strict rules in this regard since 2019. Minors could play video games no more than 90 minutes per day and 3 hours on statutory holidays. But now they can only play for 1 hour a day and only on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and public holidays. The Chinese government polices this by strict implementation of a real name registration and login system for their games. However, strangely, it seems that hardly any kids play video games in China, because according to Tencent and NetEase, minors only account for a small part of their revenue. For instance, Tencent shared that players under the age of 16 accounted for just 2.6% of its earnings. But here's the thing. According to Chinese gamers who communicate in Western forums, minors easily get around these restrictions and play anyway by just using a family member's ID or a friend's ID, or just literally searching on the internet for an ID. So gamers are unconvinced that these stricter regulations will effectively change anything. Still though, from my perspective at least, it's the trend that's the bigger concern, not the actual policy change, because all indications are that China will just get increasingly aggressive in its measures, and at what point will it no longer be easy to just bypass the restrictions? On to another story. We have good news and bad news for Cyberpunk 2077. Which do you want to hear first? Bad news it is. Cyberpunk 2077 released in December 2020 on PC, PS4, and Xbox One, with the next-gen versions slated for 2021. Post-launch, the next-gen release of the game was clarified to release in the second half of 2021. And now it seems we may not get it this year at all. Speaking at a recent shareholders meeting, a CDPR rep said, quote, "The target is to release the next-gen version of Cyberpunk 2077 late this year. At the same time, keeping in mind the lessons we learned during the past year, and taking into account that this project still remains in development, we can't say with full certainty that the production schedule will not change." So while they are aiming for this year, they're already letting us know that a delay is a distinct possibility. But on to the good news. Developer CDPR is embracing the modding scene so much that they have hired modders to help develop official modding tools for Cyberpunk 2077. In a statement to BC Gamer, CDPR confirmed that they are working with Yigsoft, the developers of the popular Wolcen Kit open source modding toolset for Red Engine games. Quote, "The modding community has always been very important to us, and we are happy to be working with them side by side on further expanding the tools which are available to modders." I think modding has always been one of the greatest things about PC gaming, and I love when I see game devs embrace modders and go that extra mile to support the modding scene, especially in the way CDPR is. In a quick Wolcen update, the devs posted their monthly update in which they expressed that the next content patch that they had planned to release in September or October is being pushed back to the end of October or early November. This would be the patch that would add new endgame activities. An interesting tidbit though from the post states, quote, "Wolcen Studios keeps growing in size, and some amazingly talented people have joined us to make this all possible. And we will keep on working towards those goals while keeping you all in the loop to make sure we're going in the right direction." It's no secret that Wolcen had a bad launch, but it's really interesting to me that almost a year and a half later, the devs have not only not given up on the game, but they're growing their team. I'd love to see Wolcen be the comeback story of the century. In other quick but disappointing news, Lost Ark's Western release has been pushed back to early 2022. With closed beta set to run from November 4th to November 9th. Speculation from the community is putting the blame on New World, Amazon's upcoming MMO, which releases on September 28th. Since Amazon is a Western publisher for Lost Ark, the assumption is that Lost Ark is being pushed back so that it doesn't interfere or cannibalize New World's audience. However, official messaging from the devs state the reason for the delay is because, quote, "We discovered a lot more work that will be needed to launch Lost Ark at the high quality bar our players deserve." In last Epoch news, the massive Sands of Majasa update just released yesterday, along with an overview video of what's new. The update adds Act 9 to the game, in which players must seek the blessing of the goddess Majasa, and it includes 15 new zones, new voice acting, music, cutscenes, boss fights, over 30 new enemies, and the largest amount of new unique items ever added in a single patch, over 30 items. They also implemented the updated Primalist character class model with a promise to update the others over time, and we also learned that the last Epoch dev team has now grown to 50 members. I played a bit of the update, and I'm really enjoying the spin-to-win gameplay updates with the Sentinel's Warpath skill, and I'm looking forward to trying out their version of the Lightning Fury Javazon, the Divine Fury Javelin skill that the Sentinel has. On to Diablo news. We've been getting every day the release of a new class trailer for Diablo 2 Resurrected, starting with the Barbarian, then Sorceress, Paladin, Amazon, and Druid, meaning today we'll likely see the release of either the Necromancer or the Assassin, and tomorrow we'll see the last one release. Now, one thing that I found really noteworthy is the face close-ups, because quite a fuss has been made in the past about some of the character faces that we were seeing in D2R that seemed like they didn't quite match that well with the 3D renders and art from 20 years ago. Now it's looking like some updates were made. In particular, the Amazon seems a lot more similar to how she was originally depicted. Now, another thing that was noticed is that in the Druid trailer, we caught a glimpse of Izual's updated look, Tyrael's old lieutenant. And while I'm sure it's faithful to the original artwork, I have to admit that I'm actually a bit disappointed. My mind just filled in those missing details of the pixels differently, and this 2005 artwork of Izual became how I imagined him. I think ultimately the only real difference, or the biggest difference, comes down to having the face hidden within a helm, which kind of adds that extra mystique for me, versus having a visible butcher-like standard demon face. But now that I go back and I look at the pixel version, it's pretty obvious that he's not wearing a helm and we're seeing his goofy demon face. It's really a case of how when graphics were worse or even non-existent, our imaginations would just fill in those details. Like how I always thought that the stamina shrines would make a little angel appear over you. Redditor Quad Damage 08 illustrates nicely what I thought I saw, and apparently others shared the same misconception, when in fact it's a shoe with wings on it. In other D2R news, Diablo executive producer Rod Ferguson was asked on Twitter if there was any chance of adding individual loot rather than shared loot in D2R. He replied, quote, "Not for launch, but it's something the team continues to discuss." And some people lost their friggin' minds. Ferguson had to state, quote, "Relax, we're not doing it. People are allowed to discuss things and hear other people's opinions." But this wasn't enough to quell the angry hordes, so he had to add, quote, "Take a deep breath and relax. We're not doing it. I think it's okay to have the discussion and understand the implications and expectations of other players. You're literally fighting against something that isn't being done." On a personal note, I would appreciate a server-side loot option. Basically, you create a game and then you can choose a little tick mark to have either shared loot or personal loot. And personal loot would not alter drop rates in any way. Items would drop just like normal with shared loot, but whenever an item drops, that item is randomly assigned to one of the people in the game, and only that person can pick it up. Same number of items are dropping, no changes to drop rates, and we'll say, if that person doesn't pick up that item in 10 seconds, then it becomes public. Anyone can then grab it. This way, bail runs aren't about who's running a macro script to auto pick up key items before anyone else. But what I find really interesting is the huge disparity we see in people who want changes and those who staunchly want the game to remain completely unchanged. And for me, the craziest thing is actually I see a surprising amount of support for adding an Act 6 into the game as a sort of expansion. Now, while I wouldn't ask the devs to do this, and I certainly wouldn't champion this cause, I would not be opposed to seeing new content added to the game, in the form of, say, endgame content. But a new act is something I cannot get behind, simply for logistical reasons. A new act means more story. Where are we gonna go, and what are we gonna do after the spectacular ending of Act 5, the destruction of the World Stone? What are we gonna do that doesn't break continuity with Diablo 3? When we're in new zones and you hit the button to swap between new graphics and old graphics, what's gonna happen? You're gonna get a black screen, your character's gonna be standing around in the ether? How are we gonna record new voice lines for our characters when those voice actors may no longer be available or alive or won't sound the same way they sounded 20 years ago? How are you gonna get Matt Ullman back on board to record some more iconic soundtracks for the new act? Look, I'm all for wanting more content. I would love if Diablo 2 had 6 acts, but come on, let's think this through. Do you want Act 6 of the masterpiece that is Diablo 2 to feel like some tacked on half-assed job? Do you want to take a paintbrush and paint a top hat on the Mona Lisa? Do you want to get some lookalikes to film an extended ending to The Lord of the Rings? Diablo 1 had an expansion, Hellfire. It was developed out of house and not by the devs of Diablo 1. And while many enjoyed Hellfire and it was nice that it was more content, most agreed that it didn't fit all that well with the base game. Or at least it didn't fit perfectly. It stood apart, especially certain sections or certain monsters. It was just obvious that different artists and different developers created this part of the game. And Blizzard ultimately treated the expansion as non-canon. And that's not to say anything negative about the new devs working on D2R, but it's just they're different. They're not going to have the same energy. It's not going to be the same magic, the same formula. I'm sure they can make a fantastic game. I'm sure they can make a fantastic expansion, but it's not going to feel the same as if it were created by the original devs. But I digress. So let's finish off with some more bad news. The developer of the popular Diablo 2 mod PlugY has confirmed that PlugY will not be available in D2R. I thought that it would be. I thought that it would be possible as long as it was the single player version, but while releasing the latest version of his mod, 14.03, he also stated, quote, "I won't do PlugY Infinity Stash for Diablo 2 Resurrected because Blizzard doesn't allow modding binary editing." And on that dour note, that's where we're going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to check out last week's video, in which we discuss how Blizzard seems open to making big changes to Diablo 2 Resurrected after launch. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.